It should be Q&A 81, but I forgot to put up a question box, and I have no questions from last time. Well, maybe like 2. So I might wait to do this till tomorrow when I have those questions in. But for now, as always, if you guys enjoy the Q&As, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. If you want to work with me directly, just shoot me a DM or look for my email in the description box. My ebooks are also in the description box or in my bio on Instagram. And as always, I look forward to seeing what you guys ask me. Do you need to maintain after bulks to quote-unquote secure gains and resensitize? So there is no evidence in the literature, no strong evidence at least, that resensitization is an important factor for hypertrophy training at all. That's just something that is almost entirely theoretical and based off of other patterns that we see in other sports that have been studied for performance. So no, I don't think it's necessary to resensitize. I mean, that's why you deload, that's why you have active rests throughout the year. Now, securing gains, that's a different thing, and it depends who you are. If you don't maintain after a bulk, you are probably missing out on a little bit of hypertrophy because there is some evidence to suggest that hypertrophy happens in phases and there are preparatory phases that go on. And so maybe for 2 or 3 weeks before gains are solidified, quote unquote, things are in a preparatory stage. And if you immediately go from a bulk to a cut, you might be missing out on some of the last few weeks being solidified, where the hypertrophy that you were going to get was still, quote unquote, in that preparatory phase. However, does this really matter for most of you? In my opinion, absolutely not. For one, most people aren't that advanced, and losing out on the last 2 or 3 weeks of hypertrophy isn't going to be the bulk of what they got during their bulk. In fact, spending 2 months maintaining or whatever it is going to be, in the long run, a net negative because you waste time. Sure, you could have just started cutting 8 weeks, and yes, maybe you lose a little bit of muscle compared to maintaining, but now you can start bulking 8 weeks sooner, and the 8 weeks of bulking is going to be worth more than the last 2 or 3 weeks of preparatory hypertrophy that you're solidifying. So again, this is really a strategy that's almost entirely for enhanced lifters because they need to take breaks from using drugs. And when better to take a break than after a long bulk? You take a break, you go to maintenance calories, get off your drugs, and then you prepare for your next cycle. If you are enhanced, I do think this enhances the efficacy a little bit because you can time your cruise with the maintenance calories and, potentially set yourself up for whatever the next phase is. But personally, I would still prefer to mini cut during a cruise and then be leaner and ready for another push-up rather than spend time in a deficit when I'm quote unquote blasting. Are there any different cues that you use for Smith machine squats versus free squats? Not really cues. I mean, you're still going to want to cue hips forward because the Smith machine squat does not have a back pad, so your hips can shoot back, allowing your, hip extensors to take over the movement and taking away stimulus from your quads. But what you can do with the Smith machine squat is put your feet further in front of you than you would free weight. The bar has to be directly over the middle of your foot free weight to keep you in balance. Not the case with Smith squats. So put your feet far forward enough that you can descend with a vertical back, and this can help improve the SFR and get you more quad stimulus for less lower back fatigue. Do massage guns work? Well, it really depends on what you mean by work. There is currently no proposed mechanism that makes any sense that has been validated at all for how massage could affect real change on the level of tissue. However, relaxation and compassionate touching from a massage therapist are independently beneficial for recovery. Now, that said, you can definitely get reduced pain from massage and massage tools, but this probably isn't because it's getting rid of knots or adhesions. It's probably because it's reducing muscle tone due to nervous system signaling from just getting some pressure and stimulation to the area. So if by work you mean can it help alleviate pain immediately for a little bit? Yes. If you mean can it actually change the tissue? No. Would you ever consider an OnlyFans? Realistically, no. I don't think I can go as far as to say that sex work is immoral, but I definitely find it icky and I have absolutely no respect for it. So here's the thing though, everybody has a price point at which it's almost selfish if you don't. Like if I can make 50 grand a month, 100 grand a month, that could change everyone in my family's lives permanently. So I'd have to consider it. But realistically, I'd get $80 a month. That. Is natural contest prep as harmful as enhanced contest prep? Honestly, I don't really know what you mean because using drugs is independently harmful when you're enhanced. It doesn't matter if you're in maintenance calories. It doesn't matter if you're bulking and off season. It doesn't matter if you're in prep. It's harmful to be on drugs. If anything, doing a contest prep when you're natural has more acute negative side effects than doing it when you're enhanced. It's very common for naturals to completely tank their sex hormones and lose their sex drive. Plenty of male natural bodybuilders lose the ability to get hard towards the end of a contest prep. Almost all females, natural and enhanced, will lose their period if they're getting legitimately contest lean. You can also lose tons of muscle and tons of strength if you don't do it correctly, all risks which are mitigated when you're enhanced because you are using exogenous hormones. Drugs cause chronic harm. Natty preps cause acute harm. Any chance of hypertrophy to win in the future? I mean, dude, come on. What do you want? Like, I make hypertrophy content every single day. Every other day, I'm putting out like a 15 to 20 minute Q&A that's just chock full of information. I'm putting out other videos that are more like deep dives on particular topics. So I don't really know what you mean. Any chance of hypertrophy to win? Like, dude, I'm making hypertrophy content every single day. I will write an ebook at some point that details my current programming strategy, but I'm not going to make a full-on website that teaches you how to do your first bodybuilding contest or something. How much do testosterone levels affect hypertrophy outcomes within the clinical range? So first of all, keep in mind that the clinical range is often thrown around is for males of all ages, like 15 to 90. But the average testosterone level of, say, a young male, like let's say 18 to 40, 45, somewhere in there, the minimum is not 250. It's more like 400 or even 450. And so if we're looking at intra-individual, inside of one person, if you take somebody from 450 to 900 by putting them on TRT, we know that they get leaner and gain muscle by the end of a single year. So it does make a difference there. However, inter-individually, that means between different people, I don't think it's going to be highly correlated, as there's going to be other genes that are responsible for how much muscle someone puts on that matter more than sheer testosterone levels. Which hack squat machines are the hack squat machines which don't hurt people's knees and that you consider good? Which ones do you consider bad? You're thinking about this the wrong way, man. This is not going to be something that applies universally. What hurts my knees may not hurt your knees. First of all, you're probably not as strong as me. Second of all, there's people that are way stronger than me, and that will change things. I'm 5'7" with long legs for my height. Other people are way taller. You just have to try it and see which ones hurt your knees. My favorite is the Cybex, though. Would the top tier natty bodybuilders and freaks be the best enhanced bodybuilders? Absolutely not, man. This is the exact reverse of powerlifting, where in my opinion, if you took all the best natty powerlifters and you put them on sauce, they would destroy pretty much every enhanced powerlifter almost. In bodybuilding, enhanced bodybuilding is actually more popular than natty bodybuilding. And if I had to go out on a limb, I would say that there are more enhanced competitors than natural competitors. There's way bigger prizes for enhanced bodybuilding than natural bodybuilding. And the best bodybuilders are on the enhanced side by a long shot. So I really just don't think, because of the lower levels of participation in contest natural bodybuilding, not natural lifting in general, that natty bodybuilders would be competitive with top enhanced guys. When I read that a movement is short biased or long biased, should I take that to mean that it is hardest in the short or in the lengthened position? Or should it simply mean that's where the movement or the load is going to be the heaviest? So I think those are two separate things, and I talk about them separately. If a movement is hardest in the short, it is short biased, but I would also say it's hardest in the short. For example, on the strive row that you saw me do in this workout a few slides back, I have most of the weight on the lengthened peg. However, I still fail in the short position. So it is a lengthened biased row, but it is still hardest in the short. So to me, those are two separate things. And if you start conflating them, we lose a little bit of information during the communication process. So I talk about them separately. What is your opinion on Jeff Nippard's recent post about failure? How should we define failure? So you have to define failure for standardization purposes, and the way that I define it is concentric failure. Concentric failure is when you cannot complete a full rep. If you have some other way of tracking partial reps, that's totally fine. But to me, concentric failure is when you cannot complete another full rep. Now, as far as when you should actually stop a set, I don't think that SFR is maximized on all movements by stopping at concentric failure. You can go to absolute failure in some cases. Many of you have seen me do lengthened partials, particularly on calf raises. I think that's one exercise where this is extremely beneficial, but it's just something that you're gonna have to play around with, and it tends to have more benefits on heavily short biased movements to do lengthened partial.
Is spinal flexion under load dangerous? Should you always lift with a neutral spine? So the analogy that I want to use for this is driving a car. Are you always increasing your risk if you speed? What about if you speed 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, and that's a speed that you're used to driving? What about 10 miles per hour over the speed limit? Maybe you are slightly increasing your relative risk by taking the chance at speeding at these levels. But the fact of the matter is probably 60, 70% of the cars on the road are doing the same thing. And you're wasting your time and everybody's time if you're not at least doing that to some degree sometimes. And I would say it's the exact same thing for spinal flexion. If you're not in perfect neutral extension, it's really not that big of a deal if you always train that way. However, for hypertrophy training, there's probably not a ton of good reasons to use a rounded spine like there is in strength training. All this said, man, if you get maximal flexion under load, that's probably bad. Risk is always relative to the degree of rounding. How did you learn so much about fitness? Did you go to college? What did you study? I went to college for business administration at the University of Washington for about 1 year, and then I dropped out to start my own business, which was successful, so I never went back to school. I never studied anything related to do with physiology, physical sciences, anything to do with biology, fitness, anything, nothing. This is all from basically 15 years of obsession and obsessively scouring and reading the internet and books. If you're looking for good places to get started, I think the best general framework is going to be in the Renaissance periodization ebooks. Definitely check those out. Great stuff. All other things equal, is rep drop off from set to set a good indicator of a muscle's volume tolerance? In my experience, these two things really don't have anything to do with each other. For one, your set to set rep drop off is trainable, meaning that when you initially add a new set, your performance on it is going to suck compared to after you've done that 3 or 4 or 5 sessions. Sometimes when I first add like a new rest pause set, I might get 8 reps on the initial set, and I got 2 reps on my first rest pause mini set. By the 4th time I've done that, I was getting 4 reps on the rest pause mini set. So again, like, endurance is a trainable feature. I think the only reliable way to determine a muscle's volume tolerance is by slowly adding volume and seeing what happens to your performance. If you're unable to recover in time for your next session to set a PR, you're doing too much. And if you're able to recover in time and set PRs, you're doing enough, and maybe you could benefit from more. But no, I just don't think rep drop-off tells you that much at all. There's just too many confounding variables. Is it possible to recomposition by eating at maintenance calories in your first year of training? It's definitely possible, man, but who counts calories in their first year? In my experience, it takes most people at least 2 or 3 years, but usually more like 5 years before they're rock solid and consistent with their nutrition. Usually people in their very first year of training, just getting them to stay consistent and going to the gym is a huge victory. So if on top of that, you can get them to swap their food choices to primarily clean, quote unquote clean, nutrient dense, highly satiating foods, that's a win. And that, yes, that will cause body recomposition. It's just extremely unlikely that you're going to find a true beginner who's so dedicated to the process that right from day one, they're tracking calories and macros anyway. So if you can convince them to clean up their foods and, sprinkle in some stuff for enjoyment still, and just get them to stick to the process, that's a huge win, and it will cause recomposition. Is there any notable difference in training 4 times a week versus 5 times a week versus 6 times a week for a natural? Being natural has nothing to do with anything, man. Training frequency, absolute training frequency, the number of times you train per week is not an independent driver of hypertrophy. There can be people getting more quality stimulus from one weekly session than somebody else who goes in 7 times a week but doesn't really know what they're doing. Your total weekly frequency is going to be a function of 2 things. 1, how often can you set PRs on the muscle groups that you care about? And 2, how many total sessions you need to fit in all of your volume without any one session lasting too long. Alrighty, everybody, that is it for the Q&A today. So right now I am waiting to hear back as to whether or not I'm going to get surgery on Wednesday. Hopefully that is the case. And if it is the case, today was actually my last workout that will be normal for quite some time. So I don't know when the next Q&A will be, as I might take a week off when I get surgery because my right arm will need to be in a hard cast. And, I'm not really sure if I want to try to figure out exercises that I can do that allow me to brace with only one hand. In any case, if you guys like the Q&As, you know what to do. Consider becoming a supporter on Patreon for $1 a month. If you'd like to work with me directly, I still have a couple of slots for half price coaching. So just shoot me a DM or look for my email in the description box. My ebooks are also in my bio and in the description box on YouTube. And as always, my friends, I hope you have a good start to your week here on Monday, and hope training as well. Hope all is well in your life. Have a good one. Bye-bye.